So once again, I find myself sitting inside my car, letting the engine run so it'll charge up the battery. I was actually a little concerned about it today because this car was never driven in the winter, so it doesn't have um, a plug like a block heater or an oil pan heater, and I'm not likely going to put one on it either. But unfortunately, the cold weather has been too many days and is going to continue on for too many days for me just to let it sit. Because if I let it sit, then there's a good chance the battery is going to drain again, and I'll be stuck going through the whole process of rebooting my computer system after I charge up the battery and letting it run for a while until it starts behaving normally. So it's it's not 100% normal yet, but more things are working, but not all of them. So yeah, I guess we're still working on getting it to work properly. Anyhow, the heat is coming on kind of loud here. I turned the heat down. Oh, I just turned it off. Okay, well, we'll turn it off while I talk. So, anyhow, I thought, about time I tell another story. So, what story do I want to tell? What do I want to talk about? So, I know we talked about, being recruited into the SSP, and we talked a little bit about, how I believe I avoided being recruited into similar programs when I was young. But a lot of you are probably wondering what the SSP is all about. So to explain what I know about that, I kind of got to explain how I came to know about it. So, these experiences I had after the recruitment episode, being recruited into the SSP, I had approximately 25 years worth of dreams. What I thought were dreams, and probably they weren't actually dreams. What I suspect was happening is that I was actually, because I had some ESP, you have to assume, okay, well, telepathy is on that spectrum. And even though, I may not have it very well developed, because obviously I didn't go into any of those programs to develop it, I do have some latent ability. And if you think about it, if it's even possible to have this kind of ability, what would most likely be, the most likely brain that I could read? And so I thought about it. I said, well, it would be one that would be similar to mine. And then I thought about it some more, and I go, well, what if it was actually mine? Like, what if me in the SSP and me going through my normal life after coming back to the SSP, because we share the same brainwaves, what if I was actually picking up on what I was doing day to day in the secret space program through some form of telepathy between, younger me and older me? And so I think that's what was going on. Some people, some people call them memory recalls, where they're just like their memories are slowly being regenerated. But in my case, I don't think it was that. I think it was actually me just picking up on my own thoughts. And so I had around 25 years of these, and I can't go into all the details right now because that's another story, but I became aware of, dreams that seemed real and dreams that were really just like fantasy and way off in left park. And a few of those ones that I thought were way off in left park actually are probably real as well. Um, but at the time, I was recognizing that, these dreams I were having were real experiences. And yet I couldn't place where or when any of these things happened. And after experiencing this for 25 years and kind of wondering, like, why am I constantly dreaming about these things? I'll go into more details on dreams another time because, like I said, that is another story. But it was getting to the point where I was starting to wonder if I was going mad or something. Like, I actually thought, oh man, I must be going crazy or something. Like, this doesn't make sense. Why would I be dreaming about stuff that never happened and never would happen? And there's no place that I could imagine where any of this stuff would have happened, right? And so then I got a unique sort of job where um, I had to sit around in my car at night and every hour go and check out certain buildings which had lost their alarm, well, just their fire alarms and security alarms. And so they wanted somebody to check on them every hour. And, but they said, hey, like if you're willing to do this, you can actually bring a laptop with you and you can tether it to your phone. And, if you want to like chit chat online or watch some movies or do whatever, that's fine. Just every hour we need you to go around and check on these buildings, just like drive around the outside or just, physically look at them and go, yeah, everything looks okay. So when I was doing that, I was on Facebook, and I got invited to this group, and it was called. It said it was all about the secret space program, and I'm like, ooh, I like space stuff. So I joined it. I have no idea who invited me or where the invite even came from. I've never gotten a weird invite before or since. It was just that one time I got invited, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. But I don't remember actually it being anyone who invited me. It was just like a random invite. Now maybe Facebook generated that, but it had never generated those for me before. And it hasn't really tried to add me to any groups since. In fact, the only time I ever get added to a group is if somebody I know says, hey, I think you might want to join this group. But there was nobody that I knew that invited me to this group. It was like anonymous. So I joined the group and I started chatting with one of the admins. And something weird started happening. So it was like, I told this admin, I said, these are the dreams I've been having. This is the stuff that I remember and all these different dreams and that. And this person said, oh, it sounds like you did service in the SSP. And I'm like, what's the SSP? And she's like, the secret space program. And I'm like, well, how would that work, right? And so we talked some more and I described the dreams, and this person said, it sounds like you were Earth Defense Force. Like the uniforms that you were wearing and the things that you were doing, it sounds like you were part of Earth Defense Force. And I was told that that was one of the better ones. So you probably had a much better experience than what a lot of people had. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But while we were discussing these things, right, she would bring up some points. So she would start talking about it and she'd go, well, this is the way it works. And she would type something, because we were chatting with text, right? It was a messenger. So she would message me something, and it would be like, part of a thought, and then my brain would open up like, a pile of information, and I would just be like, oh, and this and this and this and this. And she's like, yeah, that's exactly right. And then she would write something else in Messenger, and I'd be like, and blah, 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 blah. And she'd be like, yeah, that's exactly right. So, for example, I think she used the phrase at one point, she goes, most people, they call it a 20 and back. And I'm like, oh, so, and I've never heard this expression before, but I knew exactly what she meant by it. I said, oh, so 20 and back. So they recruit you, you serve for 20 years, and then somehow they travel back in time and put you back where you were, and nobody even knows you were gone. And she's like, yeah, that's exactly right. And then she went on to tell me other things, right? And she goes, well, at the end of your service, they interview you. Okay, so that's what she told me. And then I was like, oh. And I knew that what happened was they interview you, but while they're interviewing you, they tell you, do not think about anything before your recruitment day. You can think about the recruitment day, but don't think about anything about your past life. Don't think about your children. Don't think about your families. Don't think about anything that happened before that. And they'll ask you a series of questions. And they'll be like, okay, when did you start this? And you'll be like, well, a gray van pulled into my driveway one day, and I was sitting in my living room, and all of a sudden, I was like, hey, there's somebody in my driveway that needs directions. And I went out there and I got recruited. Great. And then, what'd you do after that? Well, I studied a whole bunch of, advanced communications and electronics for space travel. I, studied a lot of different things, over the years. I got involved in different projects, so on and so forth. And then I had my retirement party, which was a great blast. And now I'm being interviewed by you here, right? And so at the end of so during this whole process of the interview, they have this sort of like a neuro receiver on your head that has a whole bunch of little nodes on it. And what it's doing is it's measuring the magnetic impulses in your brain, or electrical impulses in your brain, and it's pinpointing where memories begin. So when you're asked a question or you talk about something, it would pinpoint the point. Okay, so this specific memory is right here, this specific memory's right there, and this specific memory's right there. And so anyways, it creates a 3D map of all the active neurons that turn on as you're being interviewed in your final interview and talking about what you did in the secret space program. And then afterwards, they use highly directional electromagnetic pulses where they can reset each one of those individual neurons. And so they don't really erase the memory. What they do is they reset the node that links to the memory. So those memories aren't linked to your active mind anymore. They might still be accessible by your subconscious mind, but your active mind has no connection to those memories anymore. After that, they put you in an age regression tank, which is kind of like those isolation tanks with this milky white liquid in it. And it actually causes you to age regress, and essentially make you look 20 years younger or 25 years younger than whatever you were at that point. And they take you to a base on the back of the moon, and they travel back in time, and they put you back into your room. And this is where it got interesting, because They said normally you will get a dream where you step through a portal from a spaceship into your bedroom. And then if you do remember anything, you associate it with that dream. But in my case, I got a dream that was completely and totally different than that. Um, and my conclusion is that I orchestrated that myself, probably with some help with a few of my buddies in the secret space program. And um, I did it for a definite reason. And I'll talk about that dream another day because that dream's kind of significant. So, anyways, basically, the secret space program is you get recruited, you get trained, you work for 20 or 25 years. They don't pay you anything. They interview you at the end of it. They erase your memory. They send you back in time and they put you right back where they took you. And they give you that dream about stepping through a portal from a spaceship into your bedroom. Now, the interesting thing about all of this is when I was chatting with the admin of this website who had 40 years experience and 40 years worth of memory recalls and years of studying, everything about what is sort of publicly known about it. But I knew none of that. I had never even heard of it before. And yet I was dead on. Like, it's almost like she said a word, or started off a sentence, and I was able to finish it and add a lot of detail to it. And it was kind of a interesting, but at the same time, a very weird experience because I was right. Like, I mean, I knew I was right, but also she knew I was right too. And at the end of it, she says, "You know what? I really believe that you were in the secret space program. Like, you know so much about it. And when we started talking, you didn't even know what I was talking about. But it's all there in your head. And all we had to do was just, give you a few trigger words. And whatever those words were, or those phrases, they got me past those little neurons that had been reset into basically like a file full of information. So your brain accesses information through many different paths. So my main path, the memory, had been interrupted, but my other path where I, store like knowledge about electronics and about how things work and so on, that can be accessed through different paths that we didn't talk about because we were basically talking about, my experiences, and kind of like, stopping each point along the way so that my brain would not remember this connected series of events. But there's a lot of information was still there and I was able to access it. And so if I do hear other people talking about stuff, I'll understand what they're talking about, and I may actually have an idea of whatever it is that they're talking about, how it works and how they do it. It's not like I could go build a spaceship or something. But if I ever ended up on one now, I think it wouldn't take very much for me to figure out maybe how to run their nav systems or their comm systems, or maybe even the propulsion and flying of them, because these were things that I studied over those 25 years in quite a lot of depth. Now, I do know I was mostly in the electronic side of things. I was aware that I was in these dreams I had. I was aware that I was studying electronics, navigation, and communications. So that was my main area of expertise. But I also have some very interesting dreams. One is from my retirement. One is from a visit to Mars. And another one was traveling in time back to the late 1800s and the 1950s. So we'll talk about those another day. Hope you have a good sleep. Hope you enjoy my story. Good night.